Real quick, there's no sales pitch today. It's purely our agenda to share essential knowledge and insight, and maybe bring a little fun to a dry topic here. So let me do some introductions, and then we'll get started. First, we have Amira Ahmad. She is the Vice Chair at C3PAO Stakeholder Forum and President of Carey Solutions. Welcome, Amira. We have Inno Baraha. He is the founder and CEO of Net Security Corporation, established back in 2004. He is a first on this panel in this series. Welcome, Inno.
Thank you.
Also, we have Eric Lunsford. He's an independent consultant in cybersecurity out of Arlington, Virginia, and he has been on previous panels. Welcome again, Eric.
Thank you, David.
And also Kyle Lai, President and CISO and Head of Services of KLC Consulting, who has also been participating as a panelist in previous webinars. We appreciate you joining us again, Kyle. All right, also joining us today from Stealth, that will be in the background, we have Dasha Deckworth, President and Founder of Stealth-ISS Group. Welcome, Dasha. We also have Robert Davies, CEO at Stealth-ISS Group. We have Mike Pedrick, Vice President of Consulting, and myself, David Jones, Vice President of Global Sales. All right, well, let's get started. I'm going to bring up some PowerPoints really quick, and for the panelists, and we'll begin asking questions. Give me 1 second to share here. All right. So, introduction, CMMC standards is a new compliancy standard that the DoD is initiating over the next 4.5 years, and moving from NIST 800-171. To do a quick review of what the differences are for those that may not know, that are just getting into understanding this. NIST 800-171 had about 110 controls in 14 families. CMMC level 3 has 130 across 17 domains. Method of compliancy with NIST 800-171 could be achieved on your own or with help with an outside company. With CMMC, you must pass assessment performed by an outside company, C3PAO, who will submit the assessment report to the CMMC AB accreditation body for approval. So you have to be certified. There are no levels within NIST 800-171. There's up to 5 levels within CMMC. And then proof of compliance, you submit your system security plan and plan of action with milestones to the DoD as a prime contractor. Within CMMC, after assessment by a third party, the assessment company, the C3PAO submits the assessment report to the CMMC AB for approval. The approved assessment report serves as proof of compliance, indeed, before contract can be awarded. So you either pass or fail. This is a huge difference within CMMC versus NIST 800. And this does impact bidding and contracts. With NIST, you could submit a POEM and have improvements and still participate in contracts. With CMMC, you either are pass or fail, and you do not get to participate if you are not certified by the time it is awarded. So you could submit for bids before your certification, but once it's awarded, you do need to be certified. All right, so let's get into we're going to be covering 3 different areas today: situational awareness, incident response, and recovery. The first is incident response. Here are the 5 controls: establish an operational incident, detect and report events, analyze and triage events, develop and implement responses to declared incidents, track, document, and report incidents. So let's get into some of the first questions around that. In situational awareness, when you are testing restores, should you mix it up and try different scenarios or do the same recovery test each time? I'm going to throw that out to Amira.
I think that's a question about recovery. Which I think we're going to talk about soon, right?
Okay.
Go on to the next question.
Yeah, sure. In what ways can a company apply situational awareness?
All right. That's about the next domain too. Situational awareness is about understanding the threat landscape, right? How are bad guys attacking computers? If there's no known threat, from a certain direction, you can be a little bit less concerned about something than, say, for example, in DC, there were warning banners saying people are stealing cell phones. If your cell phone is visible, it might get stolen, right? So with situational awareness, that's an example. Everybody is now keeping a very tight eye on their cell phones. Same thing can go for computers in terms of ransomware or a certain type of phishing email.
Yeah, I would like to add that that a lot of times our situational awareness can come from lessons learned. We can go through incidents, and as they evolve, we go through those. We compile those lessons learned. We take those. We create our training aid. We educate our end users, and we develop playbooks. A lot of that stuff all works with situational awareness. And that's just a couple of things that I wanted to point out, especially when it comes to developing playbooks. Your playbooks can be broken down, and you can create these playbooks per certain or different incidents. And you can that'll help people that are working to respond to those incidents. It also gives them something to review, to study, and also it supports that training and education. So people are situational aware of those different types of tactics and techniques that can be used by internal or external users and hackers.
Thank you, Eric. And real quick for the panelists, we're actually doing situational awareness first, instant response second, and recovery third. So appreciate that answer. Next question in situational awareness: in what ways can a company apply, or no, if your backup system can't encrypt the backups to FIPS 142 standard, is there another way to meet the requirement for cryptographic protection of backups without replacing the backup system? Kyle, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think this is encryption specific. So let's just talk about encryption first. Yeah, so if there are some things that you are just don't have the FIPS 140-2 compliant equipment or software, then you really have to make sure that you either replace it or find some kind of alternate solutions. I think that's kind of what it should be. But just get back to the situational awareness. Some of the, just follow up on the previous question. So sometimes, you really have to kind of focus on what is coming on, the threat landscape, kind of what Amira was talking about. And when we are looking at the threat landscape, how do you actually learn about these landscape, right? Threat landscape is better for you to actually subscribe to some of the alerts. For example, there are different alerts or different alerts. For example, like US CERT, they do give out some of the threat alerts. There's a new vulnerabilities, or for example, there is the Exchange or SolarWinds type of a big attacks, right? Supply chain type of attack that will actually tell you, hey, here's something big that's going on. The government, they have to shut down all the Exchange server or apply the patch within these 2 days, right? Within 72 hours. Then you know there's something big going on. Then apply that to the private sector as well. So these are just some information that will help in terms of the situational awareness.
Thank you, Kyle.
I'd like to add to that, right? So
Please,
my idea or my theory of or practice of situational awareness, it slightly goes in different direction, right? So by situational awareness, what are we talking about? Is what is going on in your infrastructure, in your environment at this point in time, right? And how do you recognize malicious activities, or even malicious activities, whether it's covert or overt, that is happening in your organization right now, right? So it includes things like intelligence, like some of the panelists have mentioned, right? Intelligence, not just from the outside, but also government intelligence, industry intelligence, open source intelligence, as well as internal intelligence, right? So if you're an oil and gas exploration company, there are some key indicators that you may have developed as part of your security program. And so you have to basically comb through the data set that you collect so that you are aware on a near real-time basis about threats that are currently happening right now. It's not just about attackers from Russia or China, coming in. You have to, situational awareness to me mean that you have to be aware of threats from also, not just outside, but internal. For example, a real estate company, right? They have a real estate rental company. An employee that may have been working for them for a long time may have a treasure trove of customer, right? That the company has, right? So if this employee is leaving the organization, how susceptible, and they are trying to take the data outside the organization, are you aware? Are you situationally aware? So it's not just about hackers, it's not just about malware, it's not just, it's about those operations, those data exfiltration vectors that may cause harm to the organization. So that is my idea and vision, and based on my experience, that's what I've seen in the field.
Appreciate that, So not only do you need to watch internally, but watch for external events and trends happening. The next question I have comes out of Slido around this. It said, what sort of proof would an assessor want to see for situational awareness activities? So if you're tracking things, through threat intelligence, or maybe you're tracking it through boards or different companies that are giving you indicators of trends happening within the industry. Maybe there's a particular ransomware that's being targeted towards the oil and gas or towards the banking. What kind of proof do you need to provide to the assessor?
Well, a lot of things, right? Hopefully you're doing things, right? So it would be, are you consuming threat intelligence? That's one of the things, right? What do you have in place to be situationally aware? Do you have a SIEM device? Do you have an endpoint threat protection platform? Do you have some DLP technology? What is your security apparatus, right? That allows you to be aware of what is going on in your infrastructure. I'm not just talking about your on-prem, right? I'm talking about cloud. I'm talking about your partners network, right? So the last thing you want is your service provider basically suffering from a data exfiltration that affects you, which may require you to notify your customers or your partners, as the case may be. So it's not sufficient to say, oh yeah, we have a policy or a process in place. You have to demonstrate that you have subscription, and you have to demonstrate how you've actually dealt with, how you gain visibility, right, into the threat activities, right, whether malicious or otherwise, that are plaguing your organization.
Thank you, Before we jump into incident response, is there any other inputs that our panelists would like to say?
Yeah, so when I first started getting into cybersecurity and looking at all these controls, for example, the audit cybersecurity domain, one of the things I did way back at the beginning was I read, and it would say, generate audit logs. And I'm like, okay, I'm doing that. And then it would say something about audit logs. And I go, well, that sounds like audit logs. So yeah, I'm doing that. And that would say something else. And I'm like, yeah, why is it asking the same question over and over again? Why is it telling me to do the same thing for each control? And it's only when you really look at them that you realize that the way that CMMC is broken out, as well as the 800-171 source, as well as, 853, right, which is another standard for controls. The way they do it is they take apart each piece of the process, right? Not only do you have to review audit logs, but they want to make sure you create audit logs, right? And that those audit logs have information that's necessary. So situational awareness, there's only one practice in CMMC for situational awareness. It says receive and respond to cyber threat intelligence for information sharing forms and sources and communicate to stakeholders. So for that one, where we're asking about what sort of proof, you want to show that you receive cyber threat intelligence, right? That might be an email. It might be a screenshot of intelligence that you went to and found on a forum, and that you responded to it, right? Did you create a change in your organization to close a port because there's a major threat, right? A new threat. There was that print spooler attack 2 months ago, I think, right? A lot of organizations shut down printing so their computers couldn't get hacked, right? That's a great example of responding.
So if you're signed up with InfraGard and you're receiving those, you're on the email list for that, and DHS, those would be good proofs that you're receiving on a regular basis threat intelligence.
Right, but you also have to show it you're responding too.
Great points. Thanks, Amir. All right, well, let's jump into the next.
Before we do that, Dave,
yeah, go ahead.
You asked a very good question relating to FIPS 140-2 cryptographic method of backing up, right? So the question was, if I remember correctly, is what do you do when you don't have the backup system that supports that, right? If I understand it correctly. And if that's the case, the alternative that I would propose would be to maybe subscribe to a service that does, maybe a cloud service provider that has meets all the requirement of CMMC, right? Or maybe a FedRAMP to maybe a moderate categorization that may do it, right? So if you don't have the equipment, and frankly, nobody backs up the tape anymore, right? So I would propose that backing up to a cloud-based solution that provides those or that meets those cryptographic module requirement would satisfy that control.
Thanks, Eno. Appreciate that. All right, we're going to jump into incident response now. Here are the 5 controls around incident response, which I read earlier, which should have been situational awareness, but no worries. All right, let's get into the first question. I'll leave that up for a second for everybody in the room to look at those 5 areas of control around incident response. First question is, why do we need a cyber incident response plan?
I think
let's start there.
For responding to incidents quickly, it's key that when an incident happens that you have people that are trained, equipped, and ready to react. You don't want to find out about an incident 3 days later and then start investigating it. You want to be able to respond quickly and efficiently, and you also want to have a pre-prepared, consistent response for handling these type of incidents. And that comes down to just making sure individuals are educated and trained, and also having like those playbooks, and then having a set of these incident response reports on hand, to properly identify what's going on with the incident is, and then who to report it to, and follow those correct procedures to find out if it's an actual incident, if it's a false positive, and then to act on it in an efficient manner, and then to report it to those individuals internally, externally, to provide the information on what type of incident it is.
Yeah, and I think I have been in the situation where I have to address the incident, right? So we were there in the office for 3 days and 3 nights, right? So it's a really stressful environment, right? When you are actually in that situation. So it's better for you to have a plan, so you know exactly if to kind of like follow up with what Eric was saying. You have to understand, is this a security event? This is just something, just a security event, or is it, if this is actually an incident, or this is actually involved a data breach, right? So you have to kind of declare, once you declare it as an incident, then you follow the incident response plan, the procedure, right? So, and also you probably need to understand like, what is the chain of command here, right? And what do you actually follow, who actually get to talk to the media, because if you're a big enough company, I think they're going to follow up with you. It's like, what's going on? So you better have somebody to talk to the media, and somebody to address inside, to identify like, what do you actually have to do? Do you actually talk to the law enforcement authorities, right? And do you actually know that when you actually talk to FBI, once you actually talk to FBI, everything is out of the door, right? It become a federal case. There's no turning back, right? You cannot just say, just kidding, right? We are going to cancel that request. No, it doesn't work that way. So it's better for you to have that plan in place, right? And have that understanding what to do. Yeah, and also in the DFAR 7012, there is a requirement for you to report within 72 hours of discovery of the incident. Right, so you need to have that type of understanding and put that into your incident response plan as well, right? Because we're talking about all the DoD kind of type of an incident now.
Thanks, Kyle. Go ahead, Enya.
I think those are very great points, Kyle and Eric, that you brought up. 25 years ago, I started my career as a security professional. I was called to go to the crime scene. It was involving a compromised Unix machine in Silver Spring, Maryland, right? I was new to the field, and they said, hey, and my colleague, a customer has been hacked. You need to go there and help them, right? So we went in, we basically drove down, and basically we were interacting with the threat actor. They weren't interested in trying to extort money or have you pay ransom. That wasn't the case. It was more, hey, dude, look what I did. I was able to own this system. So that was a thrill then, right? They didn't have an incident response plan. Fast forward a quarter of a century later to today, I do incident response for a living. I do breach investigations for a living. I mean, I will tell you right now, a lot of organizations, they have no incident response plan, small or large. So the incident response plan, like Eric mentioned and like Kyle mentioned, and I'm sure Amira will agree. If a plan doesn't exist, then you totally flying blind, right? If a plan doesn't exist, then you want to contact maybe your local police or the city sheriff or police or FBI, and give me a break. FBI doesn't want to hear about your system being compromised unless it's of national security interest. They can care less. Everybody's calling them, right? So do your homework and develop an incident response capability for your organization. And oh, by the way, this is not something you just go on the internet and just say, oh, this is the incident response template, I have to adopt this. And then just maybe do a test replacement and make it your own, right? It has to be tailored towards your organization. It has to be tested. It has to be rehearsed. It has to be socialized. And you have to have those chain of command. Who do I contact, like Kyle mentioned, when there is an incident, right? What internal group do I have to engage, right? So it's not just a document that you create and just call it a day. It is real. I see in my daily investigations, people that organizations that are getting compromised, right? And the first thing they do is they restore backup from tape. But guess what? You have not done a thorough analysis on how the adversary infiltrated into your system. And moreover, you spoil the evidence, because once you call me in, you basically tamper with the evidence, right? So an incident response plan basically allow you to define what incidents are and how you are going to handle the incident and communicate with stakeholders, internal stakeholders, as well as external stakeholders. That is my take.
Thank you, Eno. All right, next question. This is a good one. Does CMMC require you to have an experienced incident responder available in order to pass the IR requirements? Meaning, someone with years of experience in security operations, or is it okay to have a plan and to call for help if needed, like have a MSSP on retainer to drop in if those type of situations happen? Who wants to take that, Amir?
I want to hear from Kyle on this one. What do you think?
Awesome. All right.
Yeah, I think it's for my own experience and our clients' experience here, it's better to actually have somebody that is experienced to be ready to handle the situation. And to me, it's better to have somebody in-house or somebody actually on retainer, because if you are a smaller enough company, right, small, medium-sized company, if you have an incident, most likely, if it's a big enough incident, everybody in the world will have this incident, and you will not be able to find another company to help you, right? So, for example, Exchange, right? Exchange for just a Microsoft Exchange, right? Back in like 3, 4, 5 months ago. When that happens, everybody actually have a SLA for like 4 hours with Microsoft, right? They have to wait for a week, have not actually heard anything back from Microsoft. So they are calling out to different companies to like, hey, can you help us? Because we have this incident and we know we are getting hacked. Or someone's like, we don't know if we are getting hacked, but it's weird. We have this weird behavior. But, in that situation, it's really better to have somebody to be ready to help you. Whether it's in-house or have in the retainer. That's my take on that.
No, I agree, Kyle. And, when those kind of situations happen, time is of the essence, especially not just with gathering forensic data, but also for the company. How many days can the company not operate that's going to critically affect them from a revenue standpoint, or if they're small enough, go out of business? I mean, in today's environment, after we've gone through what we did last year, a lot of companies are running extremely lean. They're trying to catch up from the losses, lack of business that they went through. And can they go a week without revenue being brought in because their entire systems are down or not? So having somebody on staff that can address it right away is not just about that person's salary. It could be, $5 million of revenue that it's costing you for being short-sighted versus long-sighted. All right.
A little bit of nuance to that. Well, I don't read anything in CMMC that says you're going to fail if you don't have a dedicated incident response person, already onboarded. You do need to be able to perform each of the things it does say, which is have a really good plan for how you're going to respond, test it, right? Be able to notify people, be able to determine root cause. And one of the ways you can tell if you have the required experience, because honestly, I've been doing cybersecurity and system admin for years. I wouldn't put myself up with a dedicated incident response person. That's a very specialized role. But if you do drills with various scenarios, of your company got ransomware, what do you do next? Or your email server is compromised, what do you do next? That actually is a way for you to tell whether you have gaps, right? Whether your escalation people, your contacts are good enough, or if you need to go out and get somebody on retainer or bring them in to actually know your system.
Thanks.
I think retainer it's essential. I not to self-promote myself, but I work with different organizations just for that purpose. It is very expensive when there is a breach. I mean, really expensive. I'm talking, be ready to pay at least $350 per hour to a forensics or incident response expert, if you can find one, timely. And having said that, it's not just one. You may need more depending on how big your organization is or how large the incident is, right? So it is always good to have that relationship. You know, in business, they tell us, have a relationship with your bank so that when you need money, they can give it to you, right? So when you have that relationship with outside companies, you would be priority number one, right? Because you're a customer that will come service you when your plumbing and infrastructure go down. So it's always good to have a retainer to provide that support as may be needed.
Thanks, Eno. Next question here. What are some key things to consider when creating an incident response plan? I think indicators here are like around identify, isolate, eradicate. So if anybody would like to expand on that.
Yeah, I think, you know, when we talk about those key things to consider, just like you said, David, we have to identify if we have a problem, whether, you know, internal, external, what that threat might be, if it is legit. And then, of course, we need to isolate it. You know, like I said, speed and efficiency is key here to identify and isolate any kind of problems and issues. And definitely, once you do that, to eradicate it. Also, when we talk about communication, that's one of the biggest things. You know, you want to be successful. And I believe 99% of being successful is communicating. You're communicating with your team internally. You're communicating with other entities, which we've talked about, which could be outside entities. If you have if you're dealing with law enforcement, because it's a very severe issue, or other agencies, but that communication is going to be very important, especially with documentation as well. If you have a chain of custody and you're dealing with things like that. That's just a few things I wanted to talk about.
Appreciate it, Eric. Yeah, it was several years ago. They had the Department of Homeland Security annual conference in Phoenix, and one of the breakout rooms I attended that I sat next to, and I think, and anybody can correct me, a couple of years ago there was a big ransomware. I think it was the city of Baltimore. It's one of those back there, and I sat next to the director that was responsible for everything, and that was an enlightening experience. But when that happened, understanding chains of communication, not only did all their computers went down because their phone systems were VoIP and all tied in, all their phone systems went down. So they were running around going crazy, printing up papers, telling everybody entering buildings, do not turn on your computers, do not connect, and just taping them on. And it was an interesting exercise for them. They learned a lot. They learned a lot from that experience.
Yeah. Just add that communication, what you really have to take into consideration that, when you are, especially we're all using the VoIP over IP now, if your internet is gone, then there's no phone, right? There's no phone access. So it's better for you to plan the external out-of-band communication, a way for you to communicate in that case, in the case of incident, compromise, because you will be able, make sure that you will be able to communicate securely in the case of compromise.
Great. Says here, if you don't have any non-vendor supported products, can this practice be not applicable?
What practice?
I think that's a question about a different cybersecurity domain.
Okay. All right. Here's another question. How do you write a procedure for security assessment items like creating a system security plan? Kyle, you want to take that one?
How do you actually create a system security plan? Is that
It
the
says,
question?
how do you write a procedure? Let's see. How do you write a procedure for security assessment items like creating a system security plan?
Okay, so for security assessment, creating the security assessment. Okay, I'll take a step on this. I think it's probably just creating, depends on the risk type of, I think it's all based on the risk, right? Do a risk assessment, understanding what type of system there you have in scope. Well, first of all, identify what system you have in scope, what kind of a risk you might have, depends on the, I will just use a simple confidentiality, do the system impact analysis, right, for the different systems that you have in place, and what is the risk, what are the threats, potential threats. Then based on those, then you can kind of put together kind of like a assessment, security risk assessment for each of the system. So I know this is actually a very high level type of answer, but I think you can really go down to the detail based on the type of threats for each of the system that system applications, devices that you have that are supporting your infrastructure for the CUI. So that's a high level answer.
Thank you, Kyle. And then I think the last question we'll cover in this area before we get into recovery. Can you provide an explanation of the requirement review and update logged events? I don't know if that, I guess that ties into incident response and understanding, but not really. That's more of a general question. But let's take it and answer that since I threw it out there.
So the question is, can you repeat the question again?
Can you provide an explanation of the requirement review and update logged events?
Oh yeah. So for example, let's say that you have an application that you've developed, right? And you are collecting verbose log, right? You're collecting, logs of what you deem to be critical elements, right, of the application or the system. And let's say there is some kind of modification to the system. Let's say new version, right? With new data set or data elements, right? You want to be able to modify your auditing capability to be able to capture those events that all of a sudden the system is not capturing. For example, let's say the system now stores the user that has logged onto the application, right? And maybe their date of birth, as the case may be, right? So you may want to include things like who is accessing that information, right, as a new data element as part of your audit log, right? So that is my understanding. That's my understanding of the question, is to basically adopt your logging capability to include those things that may be of interest to detect intrusion of future investigation.
And one thing I would like to add, David, is when we talk about each of the different things we consider, identify, isolate, eradicate, and communicate, each one of those stages, it's critical that when you're investigating an incident, that you're pulling those logs, that you're reviewing those logs. Those are going to be used in the review process as well, and in the learn process when you're educating end users. Any kind of logs in those endpoint devices, firewalls, anything that would be critical in those, that was used in those systems. That information, those logs should be provided as evidence, as well as lessons learned. So that way you can use those to prepare, for future incidents and things like that, and also to update, patch, and prevent those future incidents. Just looking at it from the incident response perspective.
So I see I see a question from the audience. Do I need to monitor event logs and security 24/7, which is related to incident response? And I thought that's a pretty cool one to bring up because I don't believe that CMMC or the other frameworks require that you monitor logs 24/7. You can organizationally define how often you monitor them and do it. Now, I would recommend from a cybersecurity perspective, setting a fairly small interval, daily, probably at most weekly, depending on the size of your company, right? If you're a huge company, have a staff that does it 24/7. But I'd also take advantage of technology to have major events email you or text message you, right? That's the advantage of having a centralized logging system, is it a lot of them can do that.
Yeah, just one more on the log. So on the default 7012, it mentioned about store or keep the log or keep the traffic log for 90 days. So it's better for you to have your log keep at least 90 days. Usually say maybe just add another month, 120 days, just in case. Because DoD, when they are looking at the evidence, in the case with a DoD, right? If there's an incident, you report to them, they will just say, they could actually say, yeah, send me the malware that you actually have captured, send me the disk image, right? And also, by the way, send me the log for the past 90 days.
Right.
Well,
So this is actually where the incident response and situational awareness intersect, right? To be able to gain good situational awareness of your environment, right? You have to have a centralized logging infrastructure, right? Or facility, right? So where you ingest logs from the applications, the storage, the operating systems, web apps, and so on and so forth. So when that information is centralized, when there is that incident that need to be investigated, you are not running everywhere looking for logs, right? You have the logs centralized. And ideally, and I think Amira touched on this. So it depends on your financial bandwidth, right? As a security professional, I would say monitor the log 24/7 all the time. But it's a risk-based decision, right? Is it worth it? Do you have the financial resources to monitor it on a 24/7 basis? Or can you automate or maybe leverage some machine learning-based threat detection capability to provide you those things of interest? Or do you want to consider outsourcing that service to a different company that can actually monitor it on your behalf, right? So the fact that you're small doesn't excuse you from saying, "Oh, I'm a small company. I don't have the time to review," right? You can actually outsource some of that to a company that will give you a reasonably priced budget to do that. So.
Yeah.
well, thank you, Eno. Go ahead,
I
Robert.
wanted to jump in at this point because so far I've been listening in and thinking, oh my God, if I was a small business owner, I'd be thinking, I've got to hire all of these people and they're all really expensive. And oh my God, I've got to do this myself. Far from it. There are services that you can buy from companies, and this is not a sales pitch, we're not the only MSSP on the block. You can buy these capabilities, including incident response on retainer, very reasonably priced, and still manage to get all the way through CMMC compliance. So fear not, you don't have to do everything yourself. There are folks out there that can help.
I'm agreed.
That's a great point. Thanks, Robert. Too bad there's not a hackers union which requires them to only work 8 hours a day, and we could know the block of 8 hours that they work, right? Could save us a lot of time. But all right, well, appreciate all of your inputs on incident response. We're going to now move into our last area, which is recovery, which is pretty important as well. Here are the 3 controls under recovery. regularly perform and test data backups, protect and confidentiality of backup CUI at storage locations, and regularly perform complete, comprehensive, and resilient data backups as organizationally defined. So let me go off that last one. What is organizationally defined? So does CMMC give you the latitude to make up your own policy, or are they more granular around that piece?
They do give you latitude, and this is industry best practice. There's these concepts: recovery time objective, recovery point objective, and recovery time is how long your business can be down, right? How many hours can you afford to have everyone stopped? And then recovery point is how much data can you lose, right? Can you lose a week's worth of data? Can you lose 5 minutes worth of data? Depends on the business, right? Small businesses that don't have a whole lot of information system use, it might not really affect them if they lose a full day worth of data. But a credit card company, if they lose 5 minutes, like the world ends. So those metrics are actually called out in the CMMC assessment guide, and those are generally defined by top level executives who would understand the comprehensive picture of what would adversely affect the business, at a core level, right? Does the business actually go bankrupt because of this? They should be involved in this point.
Right. Thanks,
Right,
Amir. Go ahead, Eric.
And when you're talking about backups, you got to think about not just, the backup at that time, incremental backups or, weekly backups. You need to think back about other controls that you're doing, like change configuration, change management, because if for 6 months, you haven't tested or checked your backups, and let's say, a user accidentally deletes a lot of stuff and you have to go back and, fix that, and come to find out 6 months ago, there was a change, but no one properly, did a risk assessment. No one properly did the change management and followed those control procedures. So your backup stopped 6 months ago. So that's one thing I just want to point out is you need to test your backups. You need to have a post check, as well as that pre-check to make sure they are functioning and backups are being conducted.
Appreciate that. In that second control, when it says protect the confidentiality of backup CUI storage at storage locations, is that referring to everybody has to be in GCC high? Can somebody kind of elaborate what that really means from a requirement?
Yeah, I would say, you want to actually get could be a service, or it could be in the cloud, or it could be just anywhere that could be on the cloud, or it could be offsite. But if you are going with a service provider, you probably want to make sure whatever that service provider is certified FedRAMP high or FedRAMP moderate, right? I think at least for CUI have to be FedRAMP moderate. So, make sure that whatever the service that you're using actually have that. And also make sure that if you are storing the data, right, they also need to make sure they're, getting back to the FIPS 140-2, right? Make sure they have the encryption in place. Make sure that whatever you're storing actually are certified solution.
So backup is really, really critical, right? I was involved in an investigation recently in McLean, Virginia, where the organization was hit with ransomware. They were doing backup, small organization. They were doing backup religiously, right? But when they got compromised, they were doing backup. The backup was actually stored in the same building, the same office, right? So my recommendation is, if you're doing backup, right, back up to different medium, store them securely, keep them far away, right? We don't typically get earthquake in in Virginia or in DC area, but distribute those backup medium put them in different locations so that you don't suffer the same fate. More importantly, you have to test your backup all the time. It is not sufficient to back up all the time and you don't actually test it. And then when there's an incident, you say, oh, wait a minute now, let's get it back. We did backup last week and we can't restore the data. So it's really critical to do backup, to test the backup medium and to actually test the recovery process to make sure things work. And I hate to sound like this, and I know my director is going to kill me when I say this, but he's an advocate. You want to leverage really cloud, especially if you're a small business, right? You want to really leverage cloud, right? Infrastructures to do your backup, so you don't have to worry about the media got lost or stolen or otherwise, right? So,
going off of that, why don't some of the panelists talk about what are some of the solutions for recovery efforts? I can't just go get any cloud service and that has storage and just start throwing the stuff up there, right? They have to meet certain requirements. Can we talk about some of the options that are out there today?
Well, Microsoft Office and Azure, they're approved for GCC, GCC High, and DoD. So those are that's a solution for recovery effort using cloud.
Yeah, you can always go to fedramp.gov. They have companies that have gone through that have ATO, whether in the high, moderate, or low capacity, and you may be able to subscribe to the vendors that have been vetted that offers cloud storage solutions.
Coming back to that requirement for protecting the confidentiality, it's almost a trick question because everyone thinks, okay, well, I need to encrypt it, but it means more than that. It means that, so picture this, the organization has put in all of these security controls, right? They've got super strong firewalls and none of the users can install their own software and, hordes of people watching audit logs. And they take their central system that has all of the secure data and they back it up and they put it onto an external hard drive and then they put it in their lobby, right? Like that's what the concern is. So how do you, make sure that backup data isn't like a weak spot? And yeah, putting it onto a cloud that's authorized for CUI, FedRAMP, is one way. You can outsource it to, like, Iron Mountain is a very popular service. They will take your backups and they will guard them until they go to a secure location, right? And that's one way of doing it as well.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, this whole requirement, we're only talking CUI data, right? That this doesn't apply to any other data within the company, but only CUI. Is that correct?
Well, it applies to your CUI data, intellectual property data, and other data sources. But of course, that could any kind of data that could render your company non-operational. Those are any kind of data that if it was attacked by an insider threat or external, it could take the company offline, cause damage, or any kind of failure within the systems. So we got to protect CUI, but you also have FCI, and you have that company proprietary information that you have to protect as well. So it should be taken into consideration.
Yeah, probably back to the risk assessment, right? The data that company deemed important to them to operate their business. I think those are the type of data should be taken into consideration. Yeah.
Great. Appreciate that.
Yeah, just another note here is that because we're talking about the ransomware, a lot of, I would say, decent number of people, they probably will do a backup because, hey, I have this cloud OneDrive or whatever drive, right? They are actually attached to their laptop or to their server, and they actually do a backup to these drive. But just remember that ransomware nowadays, they will look for the drive and wipe out the drive or encrypt the drive, right? So if you actually have something that's only attached to your Windows Explorer, right? Just another drive that you actually back up. Yeah, just to know that it's probably better to have it, like what Eno was saying, something that's offline. Once you back up, take it offline. So if your system actually get compromised, it's not impacting your backup.
Thanks, Kyle. Well, we're getting close to the top of the hour. We got 3 minutes left. Any last points from any of the panelists today?
I'll say situational awareness, incident response, and recovery, they're all very tightly working together. So yeah, just make sure that you address all three at once. Yeah, so then you will be golden.
And my last point is that to gain situational awareness, it's not just sufficient to have an antivirus, right? And say, oh yeah, I'm done, right? From a security standpoint. The entire security stack has to be in place, right? You have to have your firewall, right? You have to have logging going on. You have to have a centralized login infrastructure. You have to have an endpoint threat protection platform, right? And so you have to, all of these things have to be working together like a well-oiled machine. That is how you're going to get situational awareness. That's how you're going to secure your asset. That's how you're going to answer the question when your CEO asks, how secure are we? You can't just say, well, we haven't received ransomware yet, right? So you have to be really vigilant, right? Beyond CUI, beyond CMMC, your corporate intellectual property, right? They have to be protected. Otherwise, businesses do go out of business, or companies do go out of business. So, thank you guys for the opportunity, and looking forward to seeing you on the net.
Yeah.
Great, thank you, Eno.
I thought of like the security awareness, right? So just a recommendation, there's what I call, there's a podcast, Cybersecurity Headlines. That is something that I actually listen to it every day. So it's only 5 minutes and you actually get the latest information about what's going on. So that is actually pretty good for me and highly recommended.
Thanks, Kyle. And to everyone out there, keep in mind that, cybersecurity is something that's with us for the rest of our lives. And this is not just about protecting our country, which is important, our military applications and contracts, but it's protecting yourselves. The things that you initiate by implementing CMMC will go a long way to protecting your company, not just being compliant to win a bid or a contract. So these are the core principles that we need to protect our network. That's what the standards are for. And it's a journey, and it's something that you have to do daily. Just like if you have a baby, you can't stop taking care of the baby, and you can't stop taking care of cybersecurity within your network. So, Robert, any last comments?
Just a huge thank you to our panelists as always. That was very interesting, and to folks that joined in for the questions that we received. I think if your question wasn't answered, we'll get back to you. But other than that, just you're right. It is a maturity thing. It is a cultural thing. Once folks get into the mindset of a security type of culture, then all of a sudden you recognize that all of these things are interrelated and interconnected, and then start yourself on that journey, and then all of a sudden the world's a more secure and less risky place. So that's it. We are at the top of the hour. Thanks all once again. We will have the final one of these in 2 weeks' time. So look out for that, and we'll see you then. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.